Welcome to Visionaries. I'm your host, Jacob Wolf, a former ESPN award-winning investigative journalist and the CEO and founder of Overcome. Each week, we welcome on some of the most successful and high-profile people in gaming, new media, and the internet to discuss how they're changing their industry. Last week, Ludwig and Atrioc, both previous guests on this show, announced OFFBRAND, a new creative agency they co-founded with fellow content creator Stanz and longtime gaming executive Nick Allen. Their first project, Juiced, is a live game show hosted by XQC, the second most watched streamer on Twitch.
Hello, hey, I made it, boys. What's up? Hello, welcome to Juiced.
The show premiered Friday and garnered on average 103,000 concurrent viewers and totaled more than 247,000 hours watched. So today, we're welcoming on Stanz to talk about the new venture, the content him and his co-founders hope to make, and how his perspective, becoming a successful streamer in his late 20s, is impacting the work he's doing. Stanz, welcome to Visionaries. This week, we are joined by Nathan Stanz, now the co-founder of OFFBRAND, who are a production agency working with creators to create original, unique content that Stanz is one of the four co-founders of, alongside the likes of Ludwig and Atrioc, and Nick Allen. They announced that last week, so we wanted to have Stanz on to talk about it and everything that they're up to. So Stanz,
doing well. Pleasure to be here. A good week. A lot of exciting things going on. I feel like I would have been a more boring guest before Juiced.
Okay, why don't we start there? The XQC showing up late to the show, was that real or planned? Because that's definitely his bit. I mean, he literally last week, the same week that you guys announced and did the live show, he double booked an interview with us and messages me less than 24 hours before and goes, "I'm sorry, my manager just told me that we're double booked." This is his thing. It's known. Did he actually show up late?
Yeah, so we knew when we started OFFBRAND that the biggest challenge and one of the ways that we were going to actually infiltrate the industry was our ability to work with content creators and understanding some of maybe the intricacies of these kinds of issues happening. So we did have a bit of a rocky start with Juiced episode 1. It was supposed to premiere the same weekend as Shit Camp. Obviously, XQC decided, hey, with all the things going on in my life, with all the things going on the internet, I'm not going to attend. And so that kind of forced us to rethink. Post that, we were very confident on this last date, and we got it done. I think a few days before, when we were very confident that he was going to show up, we came up with the idea of you know what, we might get a little bit more publicity, some of the hate washers, if we play into the XQC's not showing up, everyone tweets something different, Ludwig opens the show, and it was pretty successful. I was happy with it. I know I personally debated my entire community, and they weren't happy.
Yes, I saw your tweet that was if he doesn't show, you're allowed to host, or is what Ludwig.
Yeah, the people should have known it was fake then, because there's no world we spent as much money as we did and put as much time into it as we did, and I would be the host. They would just swap to Ludwig or Myth or literally anyone else in that room. I'm last in the line of succession on Juiced.
Yeah, so let's talk about a little bit more broadly about the company, and then we can kind of work in reverse order, talk about your background kind of coming into this, right? So this is a company that I think is very unique in its proposition. I mean, there are plenty of production and creative agencies in the gaming space that are doing a lot of work. Very few of them that are creator founded, right? And obviously the three of the four of you, yourself and Ludwig and Atrioc are all creators in your own right. So when did the genesis of this idea to build this business together truly start?
Yeah, I think Atrioc and I mean, we met each other in college and we've been working on different projects, whether they were esports based, content creation based, traditional business based for a long time. And we were lucky enough to connect with Ludwig, who is, I believe, besides Mr. Beast, a content creator who is more interested in the business and life cycle of content creation than almost any other creator. And so while there's other creator-led businesses in a myriad of industries, most of them are there for the marketing potential. You look at and this is not a slight on Guild Esports, but hey, David Beckham's the co-founder. It's in the Twitter bio. It's everywhere where they promote themselves. But for us, Ludwig actually wanted to build something that would outlast him and something that didn't require him to, he talks about this a little bit in his personal videos, get the butterflies and the fear of going up on stage at a Mogul Money. Let's do all of the work before it that we know we are competent at and let someone else have that same, get it over the finish line, scary feeling, but still commensurate results to the amount of effort put in, which has been really cool. I would say that as much as Atrioc and I have done in the industry, it only works because Ludwig is so thoughtful about his place in the industry and what he wants to do going forward.
What strikes me about the three of you all is that you're very different And obviously, you have Nick as a co-founder very clearly why. I mean, Nick is a very good business operator. It's been sort of, whether it be CLG or Loaded or some of the other things, he's even Twitch had his hands in. He understands business operations at a pretty high level, right, from a managerial perspective. So that makes a lot of sense. But as creators, the three of you seem like you understand the doing part of this job just as well or almost as well as the thinking of this job. When I talk to people that are creatives and doesn't matter the space, right? Whether it be like music or art or gaming or whatever else, like there are people that have really good ideas and then there are people that execute. And there are very few people that do both, that understand how to come up with something really unique and then put it into action. How was that developed in the case of you guys, like that skill set? How would you say that?
Yeah, it's
that
really
developed?
interesting because, I mean, it feels bad for our friends, family, loved ones, but I would say the three of us are all workaholics, even if we don't present that way up front. You know, Ludwig has been it's very clear that he is like a content workaholic. He's always trying to do the next thing, the biggest thing, the coolest thing. And then you look at Brandon, if you look at Atrioc, he's worked at Twitch, he's worked at NVIDIA, he's worked on large global marketing campaigns, he spent time on vacation fielding business calls. And I think that I kind of fit into that same mold of always wanting to do something. And so that's a little bit of our value proposition is as much as we like content creation, we also like the business challenge of doing this. And I think we feel a tremendous amount of satisfaction when things go well. The wins feel a lot better than the losses hurt when going for these like non-streaming things.
And what value do you think, I mean, obviously, other than just diverse content, what additional value do you think that the business is bringing to the partnerships that you're forming with other creators, be it XQC
Yeah,
or
I
others?
think the real answer is that streamers will not do these things. Like, it's almost like what value aren't we providing? Because at a certain level, like streamers have good ideas, but soup to nuts from beginning to end, you know, we are there holding their hand. It's like, okay, you say you want to do a game show like this. Awesome. Here's some examples of game shows like this. Here's what that could look like. Here's some games. Here's a script for what it looks like. Here's the kind of viewers that we think we're going to get. I would say that it is easy for us, and we also bear the burden of the cost. You know, we believe in our ability to go out there and secure sponsors to go against this using things like the ability to fall back on Ludwig to help out in his kind of brand friendly face. So I'm confident in our abilities to do literally everything in the sphere. And we're only talking about like content creation in the form of shows. We want to do this in a lot of things, whether that's like talent management, whether that's in game publishing. Our experiences at these different companies and creating content ourselves has been an eye-opening experience to say we can help other creators do these things, or we can learn the skills necessary to walk them through it so that we can all do it together, kind of make it less scary and easier for them.
From the financing perspective, is how does this work out other than sponsors? Because I'm always interested in this as someone who obviously does creative projects. Like nothing is harder than getting money against a creative project, media projects in general. It is like the most risky investment if you ever talk to a venture capitalist, etc. It is really tough. And so where is that stemming from? Like if something doesn't give the return that you're
Yeah, it's
expecting?
funny.
Or is it just like you have to have other people's money, right? Like if a brand doesn't sign on, you just
Yeah,
don't
I
do
think
it.
it's funny because even like LSF, if you look at some of the threads, they're like, man, Ludwig spent how much on this? This is absurd. How could you even think of doing a show like this? We are all lucky. And it's funny because I'm kind of putting myself in the same boat as Ludwig of being like tremendously successful at content creation. Ludwig more so than most. Platform deal, tons of sponsors, successful podcast, one of the biggest on Patreon, where we can kind of put our own skin in the game. And again, I'm putting like a fractional percentage of skin in the game compared to Ludwig. And just really trust ourselves to fail here that we're still going to be fine. We have not done any outside financing for our early projects. And even pre Nick Allen, like OFFBRAND has existed for a little while, mostly as a sponsorship, sales, and activation agency for Ludwig that me and Brandon were running. But we have banked up enough of a bankroll to not have to say, hey, if we don't get a sponsor, this project is dead, or we have to create the show in this certain way to make it more palatable. We are going in at full force knowing that if this doesn't work, it is on us and our money is going down the drain and not, you know, Burger King's money or some Silicon Valley investment company's money.
So something about the website that you guys published is it has sort of the rotating toggle of the things that you all build. And there was like sort of the Easter egg that game publishing, as you mentioned just a minute ago, was in that as well. And people are like, create games. And I saw a lot of people that were really fascinated by that. Obviously now this first project you're working on is a live show with one of the biggest creators on Twitch, XQC. But what's next? And what are some things that even if they're not in development that you would like to achieve that you kind of just don't have a plan for yet.
Yeah, I think it was really exciting that when the website came out and we put out the announcement, like the most cold emails I got, the most replies on Twitter I got were about that games. Like, hey, I'm an indie dev or I'm a hobbyist. What are you guys going to do with games? We've been watching you, Ludwig, Brandon, for a long time. We like the games you play. Like, what is going on here? I think that is, outside of shows in the initial run, going to be the next big thing that we dip our toes into. I know that all of us are gamers at heart, and Donkey got a lot of shit for saying like, I know games. On our side, it's more, we know digital media and marketing. We've seen the budgets. We've seen the ways that publishers try and get people to play their games or get eyeballs on their games. And we know that for devs from indie all the way up to AAA, the most important thing you can get is eyeballs on your game. So our goal is to try and kind of squeak into that marketing angle. And how can we use the fact that we are content creators? How can we use the fact that we think that we're slightly ahead on like advertising trends on streaming specifically and a little bit on video online? And how can we use that to make a game more successful? I mean, if you look at some of like the biggest games that have come out lately on like a large scale, like Among Us, or on a small scale, like Played Up or Vampire Survivors, a lot of those started with just one big streamer, usually Soda Poppin', playing the game and saying, hey, this is actually pretty good. And all of a sudden everyone is playing it. How can we get more streamers involved in that process? Even if it's not at like game genesis, it's just from game promotion. There's a lot of ocean there for us to find out where we fit and how we can help.
One thing that's really interesting about you, and we had Brandon on the show several weeks ago, and sort of something we talked to him about, and obviously he's now made this jump, but also because you guys had the business, and it's going to take copious amounts of time, I would imagine, to help run that and the marketing side of that, is he became a very successful content creator in the pandemic and really invested in it in isolation, but actively chose, even when he could have cut it off sooner, to keep his NVIDIA job and to continue that part of his career, to continue that more traditional professional life. You made that jump. You cut the arm off, severed the arm, and just moved on immediately sooner. And I want to ask you, what were the motivations behind leaving everything that you had done previously to do content creation? Because I remember first time you and I met, I believe you were GM at Genji. And so obviously it's been a change. So what were the motivations to make that jump for you?
Yeah, it's funny because I would still say that like esports at the heart of, even though we're working so hard on shows and I'm streaming non-esports content, esports is like my passion at heart. I'm still watching Worlds, I'm watching Rocket League, I'm doing all these things. For me, the pandemic, while an opportunity to create more content, was also a moment that sucked all of the joy out of the things in esports that I liked for me. So esports is a relatively thankless job for non-superstar players. And the bonus was sometimes I get to go to events, I get to stand on the stage, I get to fist bump the players, and then they win and we hug. And it's like that moment was worth everything to me. And during the pandemic, all of our Counter-Strike events for our brand new team went online. And all of a sudden we had to deal with things like lag and like thankless players and no crowds. And without the things that made esports fulfilling for me, it was really easy to say. And when I quit, I assumed I was going to make no money streaming. I was going to stream to no people for a year and then get a corporate job again. I just said, like, I'd rather do anything than this. It's just, it's esports, but without any of the good. And so I made the jump and was lucky enough to be caught by an audience that enjoyed the style of content I created, whether or not it was esports.
I have two follow-up questions to that. First, is that audience? We saw a major influx, and I think there's a slight reduction now if you kind of look at the statistics. Huge influx into sort of gaming, live entertainment. Twitch, ballooned in their watch hours, etc. every single month. During the pandemic, people were isolated. Logically, checks out, right? It kind of checks all the bars. There is a slight reduction in that now. But do you think that had you done it at a different time, do you think that you would have still been able to find that audience? How much of sort of that success do you contribute to the website growth as well?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think I contribute probably deep down a lot of it, right? All of a sudden, these people who are working in an office were staying home. No one works a full 8 hours a day in an office. So they were turning to other, to Netflix or Twitch or these other opportunities. And I just happened to be there as someone who was a friend of a large content creator that was streaming maybe a little earlier or doing a little bit of different content. I think that the only reason I would say it wasn't only because of the pandemic is I also got really into British media. I'm watching, British game shows and doing tons of British stuff. And my stream time is actually evening for EU. And so I would say probably even half of my audience now is European, and they theoretically wouldn't have been affected by like COVID protocols or things like that. But I was definitely lucky and blessed to go full-time creating when the platform is going through its biggest growth since like Own3D, since like inception from Justin TV.
I want to ask a little bit about that creator dynamic and the collaboration, because your hard work has put you where you are. And I think there are some people that discount sort of any of the creators that appear in other people's content more generally or whatever. And it's gross and toxic and not fair. But one of the things that has been hyper successful for a lot of creators is being able to collaborate. And we actually did talk to Ludwig about that, was being able to sort of like keep always on. So you kind of like build these circles of groups of friends, people who are in content with one another, in each other's content. So even if you turn off the stream or you know, aren't making a video on your channel one day, there's a video on somebody else's channel that has you in it. You guys did a lot of this, you and Atrioc and Ludwig. Clearly still doing it now, but in a sort of different capacity. Why do you think that's so important to sort of collaborate in that way and kind of rise all boats rise, whatever the damn analogy is, whatever. But all tides rise, all boats. Why do you think that's important to do that?
Yeah, I think in a world where content creators are producing content for Twitch and YouTube and Twitter and Instagram and TikTok and all these things, there are a lot of opportunities to hit that like jackpot moment. And it's really nice for a streamer when they are involved in that content in some way. You know, if Ludwig has a video, a bros versus pros against Tarek, and I have like a really good clip in that moment, it's valuable for me and it's valuable for him because he can do better content than Valorant solo queue. Right? He is spending a little bit more time and effort to set up a story around the content. We're playing this CSGO major winner, and it's me and my jabroni friends who aren't very good at the game. So this is better than Ludwig plays the game Valorant, and it's better for me because I get a little bit of that Venn diagram audience or that kind of runoff of people who think this guy, maybe I'll give him a chance. It's funny because I would say that of content creators that like I interact with, I'm really lucky that I fell in with the Atrioc and Ludwig crew and we're such good friends because I'm pretty introverted. I don't reach out to other content creators. My normal stream content is almost never collabs. In fact, I would say that the majority of my stream content is full cam talking to chat. And then, you know, some indie games and things like that. And it's something I need to work on because, as you mentioned, it's extremely valuable for a lot of these content creators that have grown through the pandemic and otherwise. Just you know, having better content and being more present in other places for that potential audience.
You guys are different, the three of you, Ludwig and Atrioc, because you were college buddies and you had that relationship before any of you all became wealthy or successful. However, I think the one thing that is really tough, and we've seen the past 2 weeks, 3 weeks with all the Twitch drama, is that these friendships are not always actual friendships, right? They are sort of collaborative business relationships that, you know, personal details get involved with, and they feel like friendships, but they may truly not. As a person, do you think about that in the same way you were just talking about? Do you think about that at all, like the relationships you're building and those boundaries? Because I do think some streamers get caught up in it, and then, you know, it feels like betrayal when somebody backstabs them or whatever it might be. And so I'm kind of curious how you think about that more broadly.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe it's a symptom of the fact that I don't collaborate that much, and maybe it's the reason that I don't collaborate that much. I feel like me and Atrioc and Lud and Nick Allen all share a really similar like value system. We're very clear on like what things we think are acceptable and not acceptable and how we should treat each other. And so it makes it very easy to know that there's never going to be a moment where you know, so one of us does something crazy. There's not going to be a try guys situation, you know, that happens here. And so I have never once worried about, I mean, I was best man at Atrioc's wedding. We're doing things. If this business doesn't work out, it's not going to be an issue. If I stopped streaming or if Ludwig stopped creating content, like we're still going to be friends. We are friends and partners and life partners, really, even through or outside of, I should say, content.
Some content that you used to make back in the day, and I remember listening to it, was you and Atrioc had an esports podcast. And
yeah, rest in peace.
While I enjoyed it, I definitely would say it was not successful in terms of mass audience reach. Certainly not even comparable to the level that you guys have found now and the other content that you were creating. And we've been talking about this a lot on this show for the past 9 weeks about sort of the shift in the audience. And I have a lot of theories around this in terms of like, I think a younger audience is not into esports as maybe the generation of you and I. And I think that the older audience that is into esports maybe aging and finding other things in their life, children, families, etc., that take priority over their sort of esports content consumption. Mm-hmm. Is your decision to kind of move away from esports, how much of that was out of self-preservation versus sort of more broadly what you're talking about, fulfillment?
Yeah, I think so to lay it all out on the table and be completely honest, I love doing esportsman-like conduct even with like the small audience, and I think Brandon did too. So the value for us while he worked at Nvidia and while I was at Gen G was it was an excuse for us to research things that were happening and like trends that were occurring within esports, but even traditional gaming, Twitch, streaming wars, things like that. Because in order to talk about them, or more specifically to like joke about them, to satirize some of the things that are going on, we had to have a relatively solid understanding of it. And I think what people maybe think like, oh, just turn on the mic and talk about esports, is that I can't do that anymore. Because like you mentioned, I have more life. I'm married. I'm trying to stream. I'm doing all these things. I'm still a fan of sports teams. I can't go and figure out exactly what people who are defending G2 Carlos are saying, or what really happened here. And with the relatively small audience size of specifically esports, it's just not worth it from like a value proposition outside of a passion for us. And so I continue to do a little bit of esports stuff through the Stanz show, and I'm going to try and get it going again through just interviews and not like dedicated news delivered, just because of the real challenge in doing that in a way that I felt would be honest to like my personal integrity of reporting the news. I think it's just a thing. We aged up. The market doesn't have much of a demand for it besides the 10 people who are, the Discord's still going and there's still people saying, hey, new episode any day now. But I think unfortunately the sun is set on esportsman-like conduct.
Do you think that the esports industry more broadly has audience issues right now? Do you think that there's a stagnation in terms of audience engagement? And I want to be clear. I think that the esports events, the big tentpoles, League of Legends World Championships going on right now, will continue to have the crazy balloon sort of record-setting numbers. I don't think that changes. But what I mean is the people who are so actively engaged with it that they come and search. I mean, look, I'm cut my chops in esports, and this is something I think about relatively frequently, is like, is this audience going away? Do you think that there is an issue with and decline in those people who are actively searching out esports content and being hardcore esports fans, different than the people that watch the major events?
Yeah, I think, and you've definitely noticed it in things you said, it's a difference between like depth and width. I think the width of esports content with like this casualization of certain games, it started with us. We've always talked about it on the podcast, or we used to always talk about it, the difference between like StarCraft in Korea and Fortnite World Championship. Like the games are developed in a different way to appeal to different audience. And there has been a casualization of esports for a long time now. The games that are most popular are a lot more relaxed, to the point where the most popular game of, I mean, I keep going back to it, but like Among Us. Among Us is the most popular game. Everyone and their brother's playing it. It's on every phone. It's on every laptop. And that makes it is less interesting for people to be deep in their hobbies when everyone else cares about a different thing. You know, do we care that someone is getting Flame Horizoned in LCS, or do we care that, you know, Pokey at XQC played with Elon Musk in Among Us, right? It's really hard to be interested in these specific things if you are not either playing at that high level or have friends that are also interested in it. And so while I think this isn't like an important for esports as a whole, I think it just means that the content has to be different because we're distributing it to an audience that cares about different things. And it's also why I think the three of us all got into streaming and do a lot more casual content, even though Ludwig started in competitive Smash. Atrioc was a Brood War fanatic and a very good League of Legends player. I was a console Halo competitor and then a League of Legends player myself. You know, all of us are reacting to Twitter threads at this point, just based on different things that are happening. But we still are watching the World Championship and enjoying those experiences.
Taking a quick break from this episode to have a word from our sponsors. The journey of my career has been pretty fast-paced. I started writing at 17, and within 16 months, I went from having never written a published article to landing a job at ESPN as their youngest talent hire ever. With that fast-paced career, I've often found myself struggling with imposter syndrome and with work-related anxiety. But over the past few years, seeing a therapist really helped me guide my way. And if you think you may be feeling depressed, stressed, anxious, and overwhelmed, then today's sponsor, BetterHelp, is here to help you. BetterHelp offers licensed therapists who are trained to listen and help you. Talk to your therapist in a private online environment whenever's convenient for you. And if you're like me, where it seems there's never enough time in the day, you understand how important that convenience is. There's a broad range of expertise in BetterHelp's 20,000 plus therapist network that gives you access to help that may not be available in your area. Finding a therapist can be hard, but BetterHelp simplifies that experience. You start by filling out a questionnaire to assess your specific needs, and within 48 hours, BetterHelp will match you with a therapist. From there, it's easy. Schedule video and phone sessions, message your therapist as much as you want. whenever you need to, and everything you share is completely confidential. You can request a new therapist at no additional charge anytime. I've been seeing my therapist Diane for 4 years now, and when we reflect back on the progress I've made in my life for the better, it's a pleasant reminder of why I started seeking help and the goals I had when we first started working together. Join the 3 million plus people who've taken charge of their mental health with an experienced BetterHelp therapist. Get your 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/visionaries. That's betterhelp.com/visionaries. When we were texting about you coming on the show, you were like, you told me that your perspective is different because you are an older, air quotes, older streamer. You're not old, but nonetheless, you are compared to your peers. You certainly are. Do you think that's given you anyewhat of an advantage that you came into this profession and with the goal of being successful at it with all of that life experience before? It's not like you sought out to be a streamer from day one in your life.
Yeah, totally. I think, and I've talked about this to a lot of people, the difference between, and this is not the fault of the streamers who achieve like massive success before college or a professional job or a family life at home. It's really hard to know how to solve certain problems when you haven't experienced them in your life. And as you know, say what you will about capitalism, it's a really good system for like sanding off the edges of things that you don't understand and at least teaching you how to make money. And so I had spent, before I was a full-time streamer, I was 28 years old when I really started committing to content, somewhere around there. And I had done cold outreach and sales. I had helped develop development projects for gaming companies. I had done a lot of things, and I had a lot of perspective on at least, or lenses, I should say, with which I should view my success in content creation. And so when things went well, I understood why. When things went poorly, I at least had ideas for things I could try. And I know that can be really difficult for young streamers who are emulating, people they watch, and I'm making content just like this. Why isn't working? Or I don't understand why I feel this way, or I'm not happy. I saw like a thread, I can't remember who it was. I think it was Zekin in Valorant, who was like, damn, I reached like the top of Valorant. I'm like getting offers from these tier 1 teams and I don't feel fulfilled. And it's like those issues can be very hard for anyone who reaches the top before having a little bit more life experience. And one of the values of Off-Brand is that theoretically we can offer that like little bit of splash of cold water. Don't worry, we understand the wheres, the whys, the hows, and we can help get you through these moments. No streamer's ever... the first time a streamer has to invoice, it's like Greek to them, right? They're like, okay, wait, I invoice you. What does net 30 mean? We've at least knew what those things were and found ways to get it done. Have to have a driver's license to set up payment for things.
Yeah, that's really interesting. What seems like quite basic stuff is not to many. It is very complex. So and
I don't blame them at all, because they're making so much money at 16. They're dropping out of high school. They're doing, whether it's esports or traditional content creation, and there's no one out there teaching them these things. And a lot of the people that do reach out to them or say that they can help them, unfortunately, there's like a lot of predatory people in the industry. It's similar to Hollywood, not necessarily like predatory in the way that maybe Twitch viewers are thinking right now, but in terms of like signing bad contracts or missing out on a lot of the value you provide as a content creator or esports athlete that you should retain theoretically.
Even before you started the business, did you feel like you were drawn to mentorship in that type of way? Like being able to kind of help other creators as someone who's had a business life before this?
Yeah, I think it's cool in the same way that Ludwig looked at it as like a way to replace himself in these shows when doing the show itself is like the hard and scary part. You get a lot of the feel good without a lot of the risk, right? You can go to someone and you can help them, you can teach them, you can answer their questions, but whether they're successful is like up to them or not. And when they are successful, you feel good. When they aren't, you can just help them some more. It doesn't feel like the end of the world, like a low viewer stream or bad YouTube video would have been for me when I was younger, theoretically.
You have behind you in the video shop, for the people that can't see, your awards from the Streamer Awards, and
I keep them close.
Yeah, and they were like the reward. Obviously, the award that you got is sort of recognizing like that grind, and it's, what was the official title name? It's something like up and coming streamer, right? Rising Star. I knew it was like an up and coming award for a streamer. I want to ask you about the points in your life in this career and in this change that felt the most fulfilling. What stands out to you as like as something that was highly fulfilling in this change?
Oh man, it's really interesting. So I worked in business until I was 28 years old, but I will say there's almost nothing that feels as good in business as just like a wall of little W's in Twitch chat. There is something about like the masturbatory effect of like performing on camera, of wanting to do a thing. It's the same reason why stand-up comedians will bomb one night but continue doing the career. It is almost career affirming for me, which is funny because I am still a small streamer. I average between 500 and 1,000 viewers depending on what I'm doing. And so I would say that almost any day or almost every day I get like some kind of twinkle in my eye of like, oh, I'm going to say something funny. Let's see if the chat latches onto it. Let's see if I'm actually as funny as I think I am. Let's see if I'm as quick-witted as I think I am. And that has been by far the most valuable things. I can't even remember. Like, I don't even know what my most popular YouTube video is. It's probably some British React thing. I don't care. But I probably remember some of the jokes I made in it or some of the tangents I went on, because that's where I was really like in the moment having fun. And then I would, finish my stream and think, holy shit, I just got paid, right? I was like literally just goofing off, laughing, looking at the camera, goofing like I would have as a kid. And I made a good amount of money. Twitch streamers get paid. That's cool.
By comparison, in that regard, though, it is there, because there's got to be like sort of a moment the metal meets the road, and it like very is clear that this is not just fun, like this is a job. Did you come to that realization at some point that like this is not just you flicking on a camera and having a good time? This is actually like something you have to put effort into? Because I know for me, like, I'm encouraged by a lot of people in my life to take streaming more seriously. And I was like, I just can't. Like, I just so much other shit going on. I just want to disconnect. Like, even if I'm playing games or whatever, it's not just easy as clicking the button, right? Like, being that entertainer is a whole different skill set, and it's training. So was there a moment for you that like kind of that feeling in your stomach was like, oh, this is a job now?
Yeah, I think I was lucky in that I decided to go for it after spending, the longest I've worked anywhere has been 3.5 years. And that was my time at Gen G doing first sales and then general management. And I told myself like, hey, I'm going to assume I'm making $0 from this for 1 year. And so I'm going to be very careful in how I create content and make sure that I am not beholden to all of a sudden I'm making drama report because that's the only thing that gets the views, or reacting to TikToks all day. So I was lucky in that. And then in the back of my mind, whether I truly believe this in my heart or not, I was like, oh, off-brand's going to work. I've been doing this. Like we're going to eventually do something. I can eventually get a real job and sit at a desk and provide for my family. And so I am so lucky and privileged that I've never like looked at my sub count and gone like, holy shit, I need a sponsor, or I can't make rent. Or things that would really force other people to seriously consider. And I think I'm super lucky, and that has also colored the style of content I make, because I haven't felt forced to do any of those kinds of things, which is nice.
I want your opinion on the recent Twitch pay change, especially not even just your own opinion about yourself, but the more so broadly how it's affecting the industry and the types of creators that you get to socialize with and talk to, who it will certainly affect. I mean, the people in your network and in your friend group and people you're working with XQC, right? Like it's going to affect his bottom line by probably millions at this point when they cut him down to 50-50 instead of 70-30. What are your overall thoughts on the Twitch change more broadly?
Yeah, it's funny because I've watched even my own thoughts, which I think is healthy, on this evolve over time. I got partnered, 2 years ago. I've been on 50-50 split. I think it's illegal to say it. I've been on 50-50 split for the entirety of my streaming life cycle. Atrioc has been on... maybe Atrioc has been on 50-50 split for his entire life cycle. And so my thought was that like, hey, eventually this is going to all come crashing down. But with the latest like news coming on and seeing like some of the features that Twitch is creating, it allowed me to zoom out and kind of take perspective as the industry as a whole. And what really changed my mindset was the difference in streaming offers coming from YouTube versus Twitch. These Twitch streamers are going to YouTube. Yeah, maybe it's going to be a bigger platform. Their VOD is better, but they are offering significantly more compelling cash offers for streamers than Twitch is. And when you look at the fact that Twitch is giving smaller offers for creators to stay on their platform, they are cutting these kind of preferred splits for their top streamers. They are doing slightly less for them than it seems these other platforms are doing. Maybe something like, multi-streaming, but not to YouTube just isn't enough. And I'm worried that it is going to be way more appetizing for people to leave Twitch. The golden goose is Twitch Prime. I mean, if Twitch Prime wasn't a thing, I'd be on YouTube tomorrow. There's no, I don't feel beholden to Twitch. I don't think that they are really building anything specifically for me. This boost train, I don't think has got me a single follow. And so what are they competing on? And if they're shaving off benefits for being a Twitch streamer, they're just relying or hoping for the fact that your audience won't migrate and you'll feel too scared to leave. I feel weird about it. There's going to be more streamers who leave for YouTube. And hopefully YouTube doesn't cut their, figure out that Twitch isn't paying either, and it's worse for content creators as a whole.
Well, I think YouTube, right? The difference between the two is that YouTube's behind the eight ball, right? Like this is something we've talked to several guests about, but Brandon, even in our second episode, talked about this more broadly, that like Twitch has a lot of people, and Lud talked about this a little bit too, that like if when someone goes dark, even if they don't do a like raid from one channel to another, there's someone on that website that is appealing to them. Like they can bounce around. And we actually had an engineer from Twitch come and talk as an audience speaker last week, and he was like, well, that's not actually, he argued it wasn't true, that like a lot of people just come for one stream. But I think it's a mix of both, that there are certainly people that just like find through discovery. And there are a lot of people that just stay on Twitch. They just straight up don't leave. And I think we saw that with Ninja and Shroud. So I think that's the big difference. Is like YouTube doesn't have that yet. It's very clear to me, and I think it's clear to a lot of other people in this space, that they're trying to build that by signing people who are similar in audience overlap. I mean, like there is a very significant audience overlap, I would guess, between Ludwig and Fuseli and Myth and and Lily Pichu and some of the others that they are signing. Saikuno, the list goes on. And then people like Tim the Tapman and Courage and Dr. Lupo, right, who are another group of friends who are all interconnected, and their audience likes to watch all of them. So I think that maybe that does change. Maybe you're right that it does change down the future. But it seems more broadly right now it's because YouTube they're starting from scratch, whereas Twitch is starting with more than a decade of successful experience at this point.
Totally. Yeah. It's just, the question is who is the streamer that breaks the equilibrium, right? Well, who does YouTube need? And they've been great in making sure to sign streamers that have similar communities or that like to collaborate together. I think it's actually, from my perspective, which could be wrong, it's more important to have other streamers with the original streamer than like communities that are similar, because you might find that like two streamers with very different communities actually do really good content together. But when you go to YouTube as the first person, like Courage or Ray, it's a really isolating experience. All of a sudden you're on a website, you can't check who's live from your dashboard, see who else is doing things. People aren't thinking about you when they want to collaborate. And so making sure that you have like a squadron of people who are willing to do things together, specifically Courage, and then you had like Dr. Disrespect at the time, it makes it a lot easier to create content on YouTube and have fun doing it. The communities are happy about it. So if they keep building from these like little pods, I think that they are going to continue to take market share away. And again, the question just comes, how long is Amazon going to keep Prime? If forever, then Twitch is fine. There's going to be no issues at all. If it's not forever, that's going to be a big problem.
I want to talk about sort of the peak of streaming, right? Because I don't think we've hit it yet. I don't think that's like unfair to say. We've hit some really high moments of streaming, right? Like individual viewer records being broken by people like Ninja in 2018, etc., and kind of went on and on and on. Kai Cenat right now is on like a incredible sort of drive to get the most subscribers in Twitch of all time, and every week he's
that's my
breaking
goat.
his own record. Yeah, just like killing it. Shout out to him. But it feels like I had a really interesting conversation today, more broadly, and I won't say with who because off the record, but the conversation, a lot of it's centered around sort of how culture is changing around the younger part of Gen Z and the beginning part of Gen Alpha, and sort of how more broadly like they all identify as gamers, right? Which is going to benefit people like the both of us longer term. Hopefully people will be more involved in content, so the audience size will just grow and grow and grow. How far into the peak of gaming do you think we are right now? Where are we on the mountain if we're headed up one?
Yeah, maybe I just have like rose tinted glasses. I think we're at the base. I mean, I think especially with the advent of streaming and people realizing that like you can be a part of a person's lives, or at least ingest content that is just slice of life of this person, it's only going to get bigger. I think we are at the baby beginning of the mountain in both live streaming and how it's delivered as like a premium entertainment option, and specifically gaming will be a slice of that always. And so I think there's nowhere to go but miles up.
You have other interests than just gaming, and sort of gaming culture. I don't even know what to call it anymore. I debate over this like internally every single week. Like, what do you call Ludwig content? Because it's not necessarily gaming. That's not my actual question, but like it's not necessarily gaming, but it's gaming culture. Like I guess it's just like nerd culture or whatever it may be. But I don't even know if that's fair anymore. But it's like gaming adjacent, I guess. What?
It is definitely gaming adjacent, or it's like gaming as a side, right? Like, because everyone's going to call Ludwig a variety streamer, but then when you look at it, it's like, what's he doing recently? Or like he used a lot more gaming when he started, right? It was almost exclusively Pokemon, Mario 64, things like that. And in the recent times, it's been less. Most of that is just like a cultural shift into what content is popular. Same is the reason esports like Content doesn't exist, but we're still doing content on its own. And I would say that he is, I liked what you said, a gaming adjacent streamer. He is a streamer that is very openly a gamer. And that Correct. It's saying it like that's like a scary thing for him to out about himself, but he is a gamer.
Well, he's not alone in that too. I mean, think of people like XQC. I don't like, it's very rare. I think most recently he's played Gundam Evolution, but nonetheless, it's very rare that you see an XQC gaming stream. Most of the time it's just chatting, sitting there dead to camera, doing something different on his. I tuned in the other day and he's drawing in paint while like talking to chat. I'm like, what the hell is this, right? Like, but it's just like it's just him, and like hundreds of thousands of people are watching XQC draw something in paint. Cool, great. It's not gaming, but all these people come from gaming, so I guess yeah. I've been struggling to define that. Anyway, okay, my actual question, which was, what excites you about where we're headed as an industry from a content creation perspective? Like, what gets you motivated every single day to be doing what you're doing, and what are you thinking about long term that's out there?
Yeah, what I'm most excited about and what I really like about Off-Brand is the potential to do things that I think are very unique and more in an artistic vein than in a like, hey, let's just scale up. Let's get more Twitch subscribers this month. Let's do this and let's do that. Like, let's create something. And this isn't like Egyptian pyramids. We're not going to create something that's seen in 1,000 years, but something that we can be proud of, something that we think uses, the left side of our brain and gets a little fun. And I think with the growth of both online media, streaming, gaming, I think the interest level in those pools, in the same way that you described esports a few years ago, like there's people that are so deep in this that if you created an esports talk show where you only talk to Brood War pros, you would have a ton of views. We can do that now. We just have to find the different niche subsets, and the larger online media grows, the bigger those niche subsets are going to be, the bigger the shows we can do, the more viewership we can be on them, and the prouder we can be to serve those communities. And for us right now, I mean, I've been very into British panel shows, motorsport content, esports. Ludwig has been really into, he went through like a climbing phase, personal training, chess for a while. We can continue to like do things that we are proud of, that we think are interesting, that we think push boundaries on like conventional online entertainment. And that's what gets me out of bed in the morning. And we can do that in games, shows, books, who knows? We can do it in anything. There's people out there that are very interested in novel concepts.
Will you survive chess boxing?
I think so. I'm very confident in my boxing. I've been training a little bit. I am not at all confident in my chess. If I can make it through a few minutes of chess, I can get in the ring, take my shirt off. Everyone says, wow, he lost so much weight. That's the dream. That's it.
Well, we wish you well. We just invited our first audience question up. Dan Exor, go forward with your question.
So, hi, Nathan. For new or smaller content creators, can they be a part of the emerging content, or is this solely for big players in the industry with the audience for this emerging content? And to add additional context as a question, it's the create unique content piece. I think about Travis Gafford's Hotline League, and he has live shows for it when there's a North American Finals for League of Legends or Worlds now for North America. And so I have my own podcast, and would like to take it more seriously in League of Legends. Is Off-Brand the brand I would go to in order to figure out how to do like a small live show if I had the numbers to support it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say, let me kind of like piece that apart. I think the biggest part of that is like, hey, some people have said this is regardless of size. You guys are just trying to do cool things. And I want to make sure to like be clear, because I don't want to gas people up or get people's hopes up. We are a 4-person company right now. And so we have to look at the value proposition of what we are trying to build. And so win or fail, we get a lot more information, a lot more data in working with XQC and working with Ludwig and working with people of this size that helps us kind of like craft and hone what we are good at and what we can do. I do believe that there are not only good ideas, but people out there that are worth $100,000 investments from content. I know Mr. Beast has a VC company that he's working on that helps like fund these creators who they believe are doing really cool things. I would say that in the short term, unfortunately, that is not us. As we scale, hopefully that can be us, because we believe there is value in those ideas and we want to support them. We just have to look at how we're going to get the money to hire the staff to fund those ideas when right now it's just the four of us.
Thank you for your question. Much appreciated. I have a follow-up to that, actually. We had, I saw a post, oh God, when was it? It had to be like March or February, because it was before I think everybody started to realize what the state of the economy is currently. But I saw a post from Reed Dushare, the manager for MrBeast, on LinkedIn that was talking about sort of creators raising venture capital specific for their YouTube channel or whatever it might be. Obviously, MrBeast, I don't think has taken on actual VC money in himself, maybe for sort of some of his spinoff companies, but is mostly self-funded and has started, as you mentioned, sort of like an accelerator program for these other young creators. People like Classify and others are in it now. And is that something you're thinking about with OFFBRAND? You were just talking about funding, is going out there and getting venture capital. And to note, before you answer that question, when Lud was on this show, he said that VCs are dumb as fuck, bro. Exact quote. So I want to circle back to that.
Yeah, I think we are not looking for funding. We are not interested in funding. We want to be wholly controlled by the four of us. And like I mentioned earlier, we're willing to live by the sword, die by the sword. And the sword a lot of times is our wallets. It doesn't make sense for us to add a board seat for someone that we don't feel adds like the same value or thinks in the same way that we do about the projects that we want to take on. And because our upkeep is negligible, right? Like we do have an office, or we're paying for space in the Mogul Moves office as a whole. But outside of that, we do everything off sweat equity, the four of us. And if we were to pay ourselves commensurate salaries, like, yeah, that would be a lot, but right now it isn't. We just want to do the cool things. So it wouldn't be helpful for us, and we don't need the money, so we are not intending to. Similar to MrBeast, actually, because we are more than willing to work with VCs on other projects, but we are not trying to dilute what we are working on at the top of the tower here.
Got it. Yeah, that totally makes sense. I think it's tough when you it's tough when you have to deal with a bunch of other partners and kind of what their more broad thing is. Actually, one of my team had a question for you.
Let's do it.
I'm gonna read hers. This is from Sammy Daig, who is on my team. Sammy asks, "Gaming content is huge. It is the heart of Twitch, and a lot of YouTube's biggest stars are gaming content creators. Why do you think most gamers are not interested in esports when there is such a mass audience of gamers?" So this is going back a little bit to what we talked about. She actually, to be clear, we were talking about this morning. Sammy's like stats wizard, and sent me some study recently talking about what people consider themselves, like self-identifying among gamers, and a very high percentage of those people did not identify as being interested in esports. Like 80+%, I think was the number, or 70+%, which is a lot. So curious what to answer her question with that context.
Yeah, I think that totally tracks for me. I think it makes sense. The difference between playing League of Legends or Valorant or any of these games like with your friends and being interested in arguing whether Doublelift is like the storied player in LCS history is like drastically different. The difference in like playing Lee Sin jungle and trying to learn how to insect someone back in the early days is also drastically different. And so it doesn't surprise me. I think you have to have both the time available to do those things, and you have to have like the core interest in going very, very deep in something. Right? Like a lot of people are willing to watch basketball, but don't actually go play on the weekends, right? There's depths to these. And I think that wide layer casual content, hey, when Fortnite was big, we all knew who Ninja was. We all know who Tfue was, but we don't know who won FNCS Cash Cup number 37, and I don't expect that to change. I think it's going to stay there. There's always going to be that like inverse pyramid, the funnel of everyone is going to know what Fortnite is or Among Us is. Some people are going to know like some of the memes about it. Some people are going to know the people who play it every day or watch Toast videos. And then some people are going to be like hardcore, I grind Among Us like Train was doing back in the day. So I don't know I don't think we will ever be able to, or should expect to be able to convert like the player base of a game to an esports viewer base of a game or esports interest level of a game. And I think that a lot of times game companies, fans, marketers can fail in trying to do that because they're two separate audiences and they're very hard to balance. Truly.
All right. So this question is from Midnight.
Midnight. I know Midnight. He might say something weird.
Sorry. Yeah. Hey, Stanz, first time, long time. XQC's game show was in a lot. It was in a lot like traditional TV show content. Is it easier to sell ads on content pieces that have an obvious old school comparison, or does that really not matter?
Oh, interesting. I think when we are creating a show, there's like two sides of it, right? There is, hey, is this going to be interesting to the people watching it? And then the second half of the question, which I think most of the question is weighted towards, is like, hey, will people be willing to pay for it? And yes, there is a little bit of a challenge in like, hey, this is original content. It's first of its kind. It's going to be very hard to describe. And it's a lot easier to say, Legends of the Hidden Temple meets X. It's the reason why when companies are raising money in Silicon Valley, it's like we're the Uber of X, right? The stereotype is we are the X of Y on all these companies. And so I believe that even if we frame the show differently, if the show wasn't shot like traditional television, and there is a Ludwig project coming out soon that's not shot like traditional television, that's going to be really exciting, I hope, we would still be able to raise money for the show. At a certain level, these brands, I mean, I don't want to say it's easy because it's very difficult to raise money, but like the things they're interested in is like, okay, XQC is hosting the show and he averages 60,000 viewers. And we believe that with these guests on the show that have this social media following, we can get these many viewers and no one is going to say a slur. And if you can get through all of that, you're like, all right, you know what? We're interested in dipping our toes and at least sponsoring one episode. We did not design the show in a way to make it more appetizing for sponsors. We designed the show to make sure that like X's vision was met and that we created something that we thought was cool.
Yeah, the follow up on that, I guess, would be do you find it hard to pitch to particular sponsors? Because I think a lot of sponsors are just now starting to like kind of wrap their head around more broadly what gaming and new media looks like. I mean, there's not a Nielsen TV rating comparison to a lot of this stuff. So have you found that difficult?
Yeah, the problem with most of this being done on the internet is we have a lot of holdovers from other like digital business practices. And so things like attribution, like do we really like things like link click throughs, like what are we measuring that matters? What do we care about that matters? How are we able to talk about like sentiment or sometimes you want to grab a sponsor and shake them and say like, hey, your brand is crypto or something that people hate and it wasn't cringe. Like this is worth millions and you should feel good about it even if you got only 75% of the link click-throughs that you were expecting for the campaign. So I think that there are a lot of difficulties in it. And even though, a lot of what we're selling is based on like vibe check and size of content creator, hopefully we are able to do some things. I know we're developing some apps in-house that will make it easier to convey the success of campaigns we did, or at least help with like post-campaign reporting and be fully honest with like where their brand appeared and what people were saying about it at the same time. But it's difficult.
There are a lot of sponsors that all that matters to them are numbers, but I know that there's been a large push in a lot of different things, especially the influencer world, though, to invest in sort of medium-sized creators, right? Because like there's a certain level of trust, and I actually think you're like the perfect person to ask this question more broadly. Is
medium size?
You are probably more connected. I don't mean that as an insult, to be clear.
No, I think that's exactly where I think that's actually the truth. Yeah.
But I think that your chat, I mean, I popped into your stream yesterday. I think your chat is more connected to you than people in XQC's chat or whatever, because there's just so many of them. Like, how can he, unless they've been there for a really long time, right? And they were back before he kind of blew up to the size that he is now. I mean, like, chat spam is just like it's a real thing, right? So it's hard for him to become connected and develop the relationships, recognize those names, right? And parasocial relationships, to be clear, maybe the exception of a few that you've gotten to really know. But how are you communicating to brands that influence that you have as a medium-sized influencer, and the ability and that trust that maybe exists between you and your audience versus XQC and his audience, for example?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think we would probably go about it the same way, because when I talk about how I am conveying like value, I'm almost always abstracting Twitch. So a big streamer like XQC might abstract Twitch because like what value are you getting from like a wall of Pogs versus a wall of Pepe Pains? It's really hard to like convince an advertising agency that like this is a good thing or this is a bad thing. And a lot of times I'm looking at things like responses to a tweet, comments on a YouTube video. And I've been really lucky to be really successful with essentially what is a VOD channel, my gaming channel on YouTube, where the comments are overwhelmingly supportive. Hey, never heard of this game, just picked it up. And so that's like the easiest thing you can send to an agency that is representing a game. I have a power to, my audience is very interested in the games I play, and I have at least a little bit of persuasion power over them. which is something that I think an XQC or Ludwig could do as well. Maybe it takes a little more parsing because there's a lot more noise. And for me, I can just look out there in the field and very clearly see those comments. It takes, 2 minutes.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was talking about, that noise. It's hard to differentiate value when it's just like, oh my God, like there's so many people, right? It's overwhelming. It's an overwhelming amount of feedback.
Yeah, definitely. At that point, it just becomes scale of
just
audience, right? I have 60,000 average viewers, and that is what is valuable to you, and not the fact that like Timmy used my referral code. Those people are that's really valuable to me, and it's why Manscaped wants to do stuff, and these game publishers want to do stuff. But it's very different. It's more about brand awareness for larger streamers because it has to be. If you get into the minutia of referral links and like direct compensation through these things, it's a nightmare. All of a sudden your metrics for other platforms don't make sense. Everyone who was doing these YouTube deals with like links and descriptions, it just doesn't work on Twitch.
Yeah. It also just really matters how, like, what the brand is after too. Like, are they looking for visibility or are they looking for customers? There's a difference. Yeah. So,
and obviously if you can pay for customers, that's the real problem with data scientists. They're like, yeah, we'd love to pay $5 for a customer who is going to give us LTV of $50, but you can't always do that. And it makes it really hard to negotiate contracts sometimes when the platforms themselves don't offer ways to convey that data.
All right. So we'll take the last audience question from Patchcat, who's been promoted as a speaker. You can go ahead with your question and then we'll wrap from here.
Perfect.
Cool. Hi, Daniel. So Off-Brand is seemingly, mostly focused on making events for streamers or making events with streamers. But you've mentioned that Off-Brand is also looking into like game publishing, books, I suppose, whatever. But as you mentioned, it's just 4 of you. So right now, as you're sort of getting the company off the ground, how is that going to work with sort of other ventures that aren't just making events?
Totally. It's a great question. I touched on it briefly earlier, but it is what determines what we do in like the short term versus the long term. So because we are 4 employees in the short term, we are going to be working with like mega streamers on extremely high production value shows, or like extremely large budget shows and projects. Hopefully, as we grow, we are able to widen that net. I mean, I think there's a world where we can, where we have employees, or we can convey some of our brand values on mid-level managers. They could work with a streamer of my size on making a show, maybe a show that doesn't have like an IRL set, but is something they do on their stream. It just doesn't make sense for Ludwig to jump on like a 2-hour exploratory call on the brand of the show for Nathan Stanz, the 500 viewer Andy, but it does make sense for him to be on a 2-hour call for like a Ludwig show where we're putting up almost $500,000. So we want to do more things outside of shows. We want to do more things with wider levels of creators. We just can't do it yet. And I think I've kind of been the one like following behind Ludwig and Atrioc, like sweeping up, like, hey, it's for all sizes, but we don't want anyone to feel let down or like we are breaking promises in the early term just because we are not ready to do the things that we want to do yet.
Yeah, you can't do everything. You spread yourself thin, and nothing will work, right? You focus on what you can and what's within your reach, and I think that's someone who has people who have other commitments other than just your business. That would be my best advice. Is someone who's going through that now. It's tough. Definitely keep yourself focused. It's hard because you get excited about everything, right? Like there are a lot of ideas that are like super exciting, but you just can't fulfill them. They just don't have the time.
Yeah, and the biggest thing is we just don't want to, I think the same reason why we are not interested in fundraising, we don't want to do anything cringe. Like that would be the death knell for our company. Like if we ever did something cringe for a creator, for anyone we're working with, it's over. Like what value do we provide at that point besides money and Ludwig's pretty face? So we have to be very selective in what we're doing. We have to try our best to work on it. And if we are going to expand that bubble in the future, we have to do it with like full faith and confidence in people at our company and our culture to do things that are not cringe.
Well, I think that's a good note to end on. Stanz, thank you very much. Everyone, thank you for tuning in to the space. If you are interested in listening to future conversations, we will be back on Wednesday this week with Seagull to talk Overwatch 2, which is coming up tomorrow. I'm really excited to have Seagull on the show. And then also follow the Overcome Twitter account because we are constantly announcing new content, and we appreciate you all being here. So until Wednesday, we will see you then. Bye, everyone. Thanks for watching Visionaries on YouTube. For more content, please subscribe to the Overcome channel.